Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. All right. Hey there, wine lovers, foodies, and curious travelers. Welcome back to Pour and Explore, the podcast where we uncork not just the bottles, but stories. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, certified sommelier, former winemaker, classically trained chef, and your personal guide on this journey through the world of wine, food, and travel. If you've ever wondered what makes wine truly unforgettable or why a certain place leaves such a lasting impression on your heart and on your palate, you're in the right place. This is where wine meets culture, travel meets taste, and where every glass of wine tells a story. Today's guest, she is all about those stories. I am thrilled to introduce you to someone who not only gets what the show is all about, she's out there living it. Laurel Simmons. Laurel is the host of the Wine Behind the Scenes podcast. She is a storyteller. She's a traveler. She is a Canadian wine enthusiast, and she took a leap from a high-tech career to a life steeped in wine, travel, and curiosity. Her journey, incredibly inspiring. One day she looked at her husband and said, I don't want to get to the end of my life and say, I wish I had blank. So she pivoted. She left a 9 to 5, applied to Niagara College, and dove headfirst into the deep end of the wine world. And not just to taste, but to understand it at its deepest level and from the ground up. I'm so excited to talk with her today. In today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Canadian wine and why it deserves a little more love, the Niagara region, that's where she lives, the behind-the-scenes stories of winemaking that often get overlooked and give us a little bit more appreciation of wine. We're going to talk about some of her favorite travel destinations, Greece, Hungary, South Africa, cooking classes, markets, or must-do travel rituals, some pairings, and how to plan travel that not just feeds your stomach, but feeds your soul. We even get into the nitty-gritty of some more obscure grapes, like Pinotage. You'll learn more about that in a minute, and some other fun things. So let's dive in, people. We are going to also talk a little bit more about her podcasting journey, how Wine Behind the Scenes was born, and why you should absolutely be listening to it. If you love this show, you're going to absolutely love her show as well. We talk about a lot of very similar things, and her stories are absolutely legendary. This episode is a love letter to the lesser-known wines of the world, the joy of exploration, the deep connections we make when we stop trying to be wine snobs and start being a little more wine curious. So whether you're commuting, cooking, sipping, or dreaming about your next wine trip, definitely go and get yourself a glass of wine or a glass of water if you're driving. And this one is going to be full of wisdom, wanderlust, and warmth. Laurel, thank you so much for being on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Nick. It's great to be here.
Fantastic, fantastic. We met a few weeks ago and we had such a great conversation. I thought it would be awesome to have you on the show with your background and with all of the great places you've seen and places you visited. I definitely wanted to chat with you about some fun stuff. So I appreciate you being on here. Well, let's start right out of the gate. You are located in the Niagara area of Canada, and
Yes.
that's where home is for you. But you do travel the world, which we're going to talk a little bit about. I have not done a whole lot of airtime on Canadian wine, so I want to talk about that first. But let's talk about you first. Give me a little bit about your background. I know you've got the Wee Set, you just love wine. Give us a little bit about your background.
Well, I lived in Canada's capital city, Ottawa, for over 30 years, and I was working in the high-tech industry and in government as a consultant. And one day I just woke up and I looked at my husband and I said, that's it. So I do not want to get to the end of my life and say, I wish I had. And what I wish I had done was dive more deeply into the world of wine. So we had a little talk and we agreed that, yep, that's a really good thing to do. I applied to Niagara College, which is very close to where I live here in Niagara-on-the-Lake in the Niagara Peninsula. And I was accepted. I wanted to learn wine from a more technical standpoint than just a tasting, a sensory viewpoint, because there's so much to learn about wine. I know people who have been studying wine for decades and they still don't know it all. And I would never say I know everything about a wine. It's impossible. You just can't.
Absolutely. Every day is a learning experience, as you well know, just traveling the world and, visiting new varietals and winemaking techniques and so on. It is absolutely impossible to know everything. So I completely agree. So being up there in Canada, tell me a little bit about your experience. What makes Canadian wine unique?
Well, people don't know anything about Canadian wine outside of Canada. They really, really don't, which is really odd because we consistently win gold medals across the world. When our wine is put into competitions in France, in Spain, in London, we win gold. They win gold. I can't say anything more than that. If you draw a line, if you look at a map or an atlas, and you draw a line straight across from where we are, we're situated between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. So although we're a continental climate, we get some of that moderating effect from these Great Lakes. So it's a very modified continental climate where we don't get those extreme winters. Although lately with climate change, we have a little bit of trouble. But still, it's like a heat sink here. That the warmth from the lake keeps things warmer. But anyway, if you draw a line straight across, you're going to hit France and Burgundy. So we've got basically the same zones for growing grapes as Burgundy does. And well, guess what? Burgundy does a great job at growing, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. We do a fabulous job at making Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, along with a lot of other varieties. The standards, Syrah, Cabernet Sauvignon, Riesling. We do fabulous Riesling. I was just talking to a winemaker the other day who said that she took Riesling over to Germany, and the Germans were telling her that they wish that they could make this style of Riesling because their winters are getting too warm and they're not getting the acidity that we have in the Riesling here. So we make fabulous wines, world-class wines.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just because I don't have my finger on the pulse of the market, the Canadian wine market, why do you think it's not so readily available here in the States?
For one thing, it's just the volume of wine. We don't make a lot when you compare it to, say, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I can give you some stats. An acre of land in California could produce 20, 30, even 40,000 tons of grapes. In Ontario, in this particular part where I live, you'll be lucky if you get 3,000 tons. That's a huge difference. So when you have smaller wineries, and we have a lot of boutique wineries, we have over 150 wineries roughly in the Ontario region, not just here, but there are other sort of little pockets around the province. And you can't supply 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 cases of wine to distributors. Now we have the LCBO, and most people in the world have heard of the LCBO, which is the largest importer of wine in the world here in Ontario, because it is a monopoly. They bring in lots of wine from other countries, and it's frustrating for wineries here because they can't always get their own wine into a distributor, which is owned and run by the government of the province that we live in. So it is a little frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. So supply is a big part of it. And, obviously some issues with the supply chain, as well. I get that. Yeah, I get that. Awesome. There's a lot of countries, Spain, comes to mind when a really large portion of the wine that they make in the country of Spain is consumed in country. And we're lucky to be able to get the small amount of Spanish wine here in the States that we do. So I definitely understand that. All right, well, let's shift gears a little bit because I would love to talk to you about your awesome podcast, which is seen a lot of success on Apple and so on. Wine Behind the Scenes is the name of this podcast. For my listeners out there, you absolutely need to go out there and get it on your favorite podcast platform. Tell us how you started Wine Behind the Scenes and how's it going?
Well, I was looking for something to do with my wine interests, my wine knowledge. I have thought about doing tours in Europe, but there's a lot of barriers to that. I won't go into all the details, just to say there are barriers. So I thought, okay, I took a step back and thought, why can't I do a podcast? Because I had done a podcast in a totally unrelated field. So I knew how to do podcasts. That wasn't the issue. I just sat down and I worked with my sort of marketing guru and coach. And, it took me through the steps and I was gritting my teeth and I don't know, I don't want to do this. And blah, blah, blah. Those are the things you do to get something started, something new started, right?
Yep.
And I just decided that was it. I decided to publish or drop a podcast every other week because, as you know, it's a lot of work to do this stuff. But I just love getting out there and talking to people. My stories are about stories of wine behind the scenes. And that's why I called it Wine Behind the Scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about wine. Anybody can talk about wine. It's red, it's pink, it's white, it's sparkling. Okay, there we go. We covered it. And we can talk about it tastes like this and it tastes like that. And you get these notes and you get those notes and all the technical stuff. But every bottle of wine has a story behind it. Somebody made it. Somebody picked those grapes. Somebody designed the label. Somebody marketed it. Somebody clean the vats and the oak barrels to put the must in. Somebody bought the yeast. There are so many stories, especially when you get into Europe. Now you're talking generations of people who live and work that land. Although, to be honest, I just did a podcast with someone here in just up the road from me. Her family has been on that farm for 7 generations.
Wow.
And has grown grape for 5. So we're starting to get there. I mean, our industry is still young here, but there's so many stories. New wineries start up. Sometimes wineries struggle. They change labels. They change their marketing, like what goes on behind that. There's so much to talk about it. And I find it fascinating. It's history. It's culture. It's art. It's food. Let's never forget food.
100%. I never forget about food. Trust me. Having folks understand what it takes. And actually, I have an episode coming up in just a couple weeks that talks about this exact subject, what it takes to create a bottle of wine. From the planting of the grapes, to the cultivating of the grapes, to the harvesting, to the winemaking practices, the bottling, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. As you said, that's the 30,000-foot view of it. We're not even talking about labeling and capsules and corks. And, are we going to use a cork? Or are we going to use a screw top? Are we going to use a composite cork? Are we going to use a natural cork? All of these things are, decisions that go into what finally winds up in your glass. And, my goal in life, and it sounds like yours as well, is to have people appreciate it more, and that's what I would like to see. Is a little more appreciation of this beautiful thing that we, make every day and drink every day and so on. So you brought up food, and of course, this is a wine, food, and travel podcast. Tell me about some of your favorite wine pairings, just off the top of your head. Give me a couple of dishes and wine that absolutely do it for you.
Well, I love to make bourguignon.
Mhm.
And although that comes from Burgundy traditionally, I don't necessarily serve a Pinot Noir with it. So I might pull out a Malbec. I might pull out a Syrah, something that's got a little more oomph to it than a Pinot Noir. Not that there's anything wrong with Pinot Noir, but those are some of my favorite pairings. Cabernet Franc. I prefer Cabernet Franc over Cabernet Sauvignon, but that's That's just my palate, right?
Of course.
We make wonderful Cabernet Franc here. We make the best in the world as far as I'm concerned. So that's one dish I absolutely adore. Another one I do, and this is Pinot Noir based.
Hmm.
It is wild salmon marinated in a marinade of Pinot Noir, maple syrup, and a little bit of oil.
Hmm.
And then, you put it on the cedar plank, throw it on the barbecue, throw a little lemon on it, and wow.
Absolutely. And, having Pinot Noir or a lighter bodied red wine with salmon, is wonderful. And it's a pairing that people often overlook because it's kind of ingrained in our psyche, that you can only drink white wine with fish, which is
Exactly.
absolutely not the case. Well, you and I could both go on for hours, I'm sure, about all of the amazing red wine pairings that you could do with fish. But we're not going to do that today, maybe some other time. So out on the road, we're going to talk about travel here in just a second, but you do a lot of traveling, so you're seeing a lot of cultures and a lot of different things and a lot of different types of foods. Are there any pairings that you've come across that have surprised you how good they match up together?
That's an interesting one. I've eaten in so many countries. Isn't that a terrible thing to say? I've eaten in so many countries. I've had so much wine in so many countries. They all start to blend together after a while. Many pairings that surprise me. You don't necessarily have to pair red wine with red protein. I just was talking about this the other day.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with taking a dish, say, that does have red meat, red protein in it, and then focusing on another aspect of the meal. I was interviewing someone from Greece, and she was talking about pistachio. And she said with the herbs in the meat, and it's very lightly herbed, and a light layer of meat and some bechamel, but very light bechamel. She was serving it with a white wine. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. But she said it worked really well because the acidity in the white wine cut through the fat
Yes.
in the bechamel and the meat.
That's a great example. My birthday was just the other day, so I decided to have a little steak dinner for my birthday. And I created call it a beurre blanc sauce, if you will, onions, butter to finish, of course. But instead of red, I used white wine for the sauce to go with the steak that I prepared. And it was exactly what you're talking about. The acidity in that white wine, I believe it was a Sauvignon Blanc, really cut through I served it with au gratin potatoes, so really helped to brighten up and cut through the fat. Yeah. So again, the point that we're trying to make here, Laurel and I, is don't necessarily go for conformity. If you like white wine with your steak, you go ahead and do that. Absolutely. You like red wine with your soul, you know what? Go for it. I completely believe that. One of my standard lines is, as you all know, is you drink what you like and you pair what you like as well. I wholeheartedly believe that and agree with that.
Well, and one of my advice too is that, for heaven's sakes, it's a bottle of wine. If you don't like it, or open something else, right?
Yes.
Well, on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like rocket science.
All right, let's transition into travel for a few minutes here. You and I both love to travel, and as you mentioned earlier, doing tours in different countries, it does have some stumbling blocks, which I've found out myself, and I'm finding out new ones every day, and so on. But you're out there, you're doing it, you're doing the travel, you're having a great time. When you're visiting a new wine destination, what's the first thing that you look for to get a sense of the local culture?
Well, I am lucky in that I know so many people now around the world that I can just send them WhatsApp, a text, a little email, and say, "Hey, I'm coming over. Where do you recommend? Oh, where should I go? Like, I'm heading over to Hungary and Croatia in a few weeks to a conference in Hungary. I happened to email someone who was at this conference last year, and she said, well, I live in this little island off the coast of Croatia in the Adriatic. And if you'd like to spend a couple of days with me on the island exploring some wineries, you want to come over?" It's like, 2 seconds to, yes, like, who's going to turn down
Twist
that?
my arm.
But I do look for areas that maybe are up and coming. I look for just things that capture my own interest because I love history. I love art. I love food. One of the things I do when I travel, and I've started doing it now quite a few times, is going to a cooking class when I get somewhere, because there's nothing like taking a cooking class with the locals to just plunge you into the local culture. Because generally we go to the markets first and we buy some food and then we take it back to the kitchen, wherever that is.
Mhm.
And we spend 3 or 4 hours cooking and we eat that food with the local wine. Now I've got a real base and I can say, okay, I love this wine. Where can I go? Sometimes I will have places picked out, but it is nice to get that local flavor, unintended, I guess, about
Mhm.
what wines the locals drink, so that when I go out to wineries, I can say, I want to try this. Where can I find this? Because I know where I'm going to go, and usually it's not hard to find wineries at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, beyond knowing someone in the place that you're
Yes.
going, we all don't have that luxury. A tool that I've found very helpful over the last year for my travels has been ChatGPT. It's a free service that everyone has access to. Go in there, start a conversation with ChatGPT, talk very specifically about the areas that you're going to, and very specifically ask for local culture, local restaurants that are not the tourist traps, local wineries, things like that, great shops, great markets. As you brought up, I never visit a place without visiting their market as a som and as a chef. I want to see what they're doing in their food culture in an area, and I think there's a better place to do that than at their local markets. Some of my favorite markets are, of course, in Venice in Italy, beautiful places. There's a great market in Lyon in France that I will never forget that experience. These are all going to add on to your experience, rather than just going to the big tourist trap locations and, getting out there and actually enjoying the culture of the place that you're in.
One thing I also do is as I go and I watch shows on like Netflix, there's a show called Somebody Feed Phil. I love that show. I don't know if you've ever seen it. He goes around the world and he eats a lot, but there's always wine involved. And in fact, he did an episode of Santiago in Chile. And it was so fascinating. A friend of mine was going down there and I said, you have to watch this show. You have to watch this episode because he talks about these restaurants. He talks about the food. He talks about the wines and she loves wine. So she watched it and she said, okay, I've got it mapped out. I know where I'm going. Then there are a lot of TV shows out there that will give you really good insights, like travel shows. There's something out of the Netherlands, Wine Masters TV. I watch that because it gives me clues about where to go and what wine to look for. So it's not like I know everything about wine. Like I said in the earlier, I don't, can't possibly. Those are really good tools that I use to figure out, okay, if I want to go to a country, well then, all right, let's find out what other people are saying. And oh, this looks like really interesting place to go. These look like really interesting wines. And then you can start to do your research. Okay, what's the best place to go? What's the best place
Mhm.
to stay? And you just start drilling down, right?
Absolutely. 100%. The shows that you're talking about, I've never seen the show Someone Feed Phil, but I've seen shows like that, and they're going in and they're doing exactly what we're talking about is they're doing a deep dive into the local culture. They're sitting down with a bunch of strangers and enjoying a meal and having a good time and really getting into it, and you don't need a TV crew, a preset design and all of that stuff in order to have that same experience. You just need to go there and do it. So on that note, do you have any fun stories that you can share with us about, going into a place and sitting down with a bunch of strangers and having a great time?
Well, oh, there's so many stories. Speaking of Chile, it just popped into my head. I was down in Chile, oh, maybe 8, 9 years ago. And it was just before a very significant religious holiday. And I'm sorry, I do not remember what it was, but we were near Valparaiso. We were actually in the Casablanca Valley and they made beautiful wines there. And we had hired a local taxi driver who was actually Argentinian Australian. He spoke Spanish with an Australian accent. It was very odd, but he was a great guy and he spoke really good English. And there were four of us. So we piled into his taxi and he took us around and everything was closing up because of this holiday. And he said, okay, because we were hungry. We wanted lunch. We rolled into this little village and I'm not kidding. People were trying to pull down the shutters and he knocked on the door and there was a little restaurant and we walked in and the owner was there and they said, come on in. We had the best meal. It was fish. It was local meat. It was the local wines. And Carmenere is really big in Chile. And the wine just kept flowing and the food just kept coming. And at the end of the meal, when we could hardly move, he looked at us and he said, wait. And this was all in Spanish. And
Sure.
he brought out this very innocent looking bottle. Yes. Well, you could have set up a bomb with this stuff. It was his local brandy. He made it. He made it. But those are the things you remember, right? I remember taking a sip of it and going, holy smokes, cleared out my nasal passages for the next year.
Oh my goodness. What an awesome story.
Yeah, those are the things you remember. And even you were talking about markets. I don't know if you've ever visited the city of Porto in Portugal.
I've not been there yet.
Well, it's one of my favorite cities in the world. And there's the Mercado de Bolao, which is basically, I guess it translated literally, it's the market of cod. But this is a local market right on the verge of the city. And I was in there and I love this place because, yes, you get all the local fish, you get the meat, you get the vegetables and the fruit and the herbs and the bread and all the pastries and everything you could possibly want to buy. I would tell anyone, you have to go because along the edge of the market, one wall, there's maybe 4 or 5 wine bars. And you just walk up and you say, I'd like a glass of wine, please, whatever, pick what you want. They hand you a glass, and I do mean a glass. It's none of this plastic stuff. It's not in a paper cup. It's a proper wine glass. They fill it. You pay for it. Oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 euros. It's nothing, right? Absolutely nothing. And then they say, just bring the glass back when you're finished. And you wander around the market and you can shop and you can sit and you can sip your wine. Well, why would you not want to go and experience that?
Absolutely. I'm going to need to get the name of that market from you for when I go to Portugal next year. That sounds dreamy. I don't say that word, but that sounds dreamy. Love that. So speaking of dreams, let's dream a little bit. What is your ultimate wine and food travel fantasy?
Well, way up at the top of my bucket list is a trip to New Zealand. I haven't made it there yet. And I know a lot of people now, winemakers in New Zealand, who have come from other countries and even who have come from New Zealand to Canada. And I'm just itching to go to New Zealand and just doing a deep dive into their, of course, Sauvignon Blanc and their Pinot Noir. Like, this to me is like heaven, just heaven. I can't wait to go.
Well, you know what? I've got some great news because I just the other day booked a tour in New Zealand. We're doing the North Island of New Zealand, flying into Auckland and working our way all the way down the island into Wellington. You should come. You should come with me and all your friends. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a 9-day tour through the North Island of New Zealand. I think that sounds right up your alley.
That would be just absolutely fabulous. And another place I would really love to visit is South Africa. They have a burgeoning wine industry now. They're finally recovering from apartheid. It's taken a long, long time. But some of the wines I taste from South Africa are fabulous. And I do know people who live there. I can't wait to go and just, again, do a deep dive into those wineries because they do make the standards, the Sauvignon Blanc, the Chardonnay, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And I really would like to experience that. That's the thing about travel. You don't, at least for me, I don't want to just try the standard noble grapes. Like, I can get those anywhere. Now, when I'm in Bulgaria, and I've been to Bulgaria a couple of times now, I love their Mavrud and the Reuben. I'm going to Hungary. And yes, Tokaj is very famous. Of course, I'm going to be trying some Tokaj, but they also have other grapes. In Croatia, they have their own grapes. I can't wait to get into that. Greece. Oh my goodness. The stories I could tell you about Greece, not just Crete and Santorini, because they have their grape varieties there, like Assyrtiko and various other grapes. But when you get into northern Greece, their grapes are just absolutely fabulous. And they make wonderful, wonderful wines.
Well, you're making me thirsty, to say the least. Laurel, we're running out of time, so I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the show today. And I really, really appreciate your knowledge, the great information about Canadian wine. I definitely want to check out more of that 100%. And to the listeners, one more time, get out there and listen to Laurel's podcast. It's available on Apple Podcasts, and it's called Wine Behind the Scenes. You have to listen to this show. It's very, very cool. And if you love the stories that you heard from Laurel, these short little snippets, you're going to love to listen to what she has to say on her podcast. So please do that. Thank you very much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Wow. How fun was that? Big thanks to Laurel Simmons for joining me on the show today and for taking us on such a thoughtful, globe-spanning, and grape-loving journey. Laurel, thank you so much. You know, from Niagara's cool climate Pinot Noirs and Rieslings to sipping wine in Portuguese markets, podcasting about unsung heroes of winemaking and swapping red for white with your steak. This episode had it all, and I'm so glad you were here to go on this journey with us. I really, really appreciate it. It's about tasting a place, honoring a process, celebrating people. Let's just enjoy what we pour and let's explore a little bit more. Here are some of my takeaways. Don't be afraid to try the weird grape. Let's say yes to that local cooking class, even though it might be off the beaten path or it doesn't fit into your schedule. Let's make time for it. These are things that I do when I'm out on the road. I'm a chef and I still go to cooking classes when I'm out on the road. I love doing it. It's a great way to enjoy and learn something new. Let's be weird and drink your Sauvignon Blanc with a steak if that makes you happy. What's my motto, folks? Drink what you like. And most of all, ask about the story behind what is in your glass. Let's learn a little bit more. Let's appreciate a little bit more. And speaking of more, if you want more of these great stories, like the ones Laurel shared today, get out there, go subscribe to the Wine Behind the Scenes podcast. It's available on most of the major platforms, and it's available for you whenever you are ready to listen. And hey, if you're listening, it's a podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to rate. It really helps us out. I know Laurel would appreciate it too if you're checking out her show. It's a great thing for you to do is put your mark on what we're doing here out in the podcast world. And hey, if you're listening to this and thinking, I always wanted to go to New Zealand, or I always wanted to go to Germany. You know what, folks? I've got great news. I've got some trips coming up that you are absolutely going to love. Make sure you head over to the website and check that out. You'll find some more information about my upcoming trips on my social media platforms as well, TikTok, Instagram, etc., etc., etc. Don't forget to comment. If you have any questions, let me know. I'd be happy to get those answered for you. And folks, again, thank you for being here today. Thanks for listening. I really enjoyed you being here. I hope you enjoyed the show. And until next time, keep wondering and wandering, everybody. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, and your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.